To tell the truth.
To tell the truth.
Beautiful. Thank
and
you.
And nothing but the truth. My name is Indira Singh. I live and work at Ground Zero. I am a volunteer EMT, or I was prior to 9/11, and I will tell you my story, the story of Ptech. After I fulfill my duties to Sibel Edmonds and read her statement. So first, I would like to take this opportunity to read from Sibel Edmonds' letter to Thomas Keane. I am going to read excerpts of this letter, which is going around the internet, and Sibel is asking everyone, when they receive it, to forward it on to him with your name and comments. These are excerpts from her wonderful letter. Dear Chairman Keane, unfortunately, I find your report seriously flawed in its failure to address serious intelligence issues that I am aware of, which have been confirmed and which, as a witness to the Commission, I made you aware of. Thus, I must assume that other serious issues that I am not aware of were in the same manner omitted from your report. It has been almost 3 years since the terrorist attacks on September 11th. These omissions cast doubt on the validity of your report and therefore on its conclusions and recommendations. After the terrorist attacks of September 11th, we, the translators at the FBI's largest and most important translation unit, were told to slow down, even stop, translation of critical information related to terrorist activities so that the FBI could present the United States Congress with a record of extensive backlog of untranslated documents and justify its request for budget and staff increases. While FBI agents from various field offices were desperately seeking leads and suspects and completely depending on FBI headquarters and its language units to provide them with needed translated information, hundreds of translators were being told by their administrative supervisors not to translate and to let the work pile up. This issue has been confirmed by the Senate Judiciary Committee. Your report has omitted any reference to this most serious issue and has foregone any accountability whatsoever, and your recommendations have refrained from addressing this issue, which, when left unaddressed, will have even more serious consequences. Melik Can Dickerson, a Turkish translator, was hired by the FBI after September 11th and was placed in charge of translating the most sensitive information related to terrorists and criminals under the Bureau's investigation. Melik Can Dickerson was granted top-secret clearance, which can be granted only after conducting a thorough background investigation. Melik Can Dickerson used to work for a semi-legit organization that were the FBI's targets of investigation. Melik Can Dickerson had ongoing relationships with two individuals who were FBI targets of investigation. For months, Dickerson blocked all important information related to these semi-legit organizations and the individuals she and her husband associated with. She stamped hundreds, if not thousands, of documents related to these targets as not pertinent. Melik Can Dickerson attempted to prevent others from translating these documents important to the FBI's investigations and our fight against terrorism. With the assistance of her direct supervisor, Mike Faghall, she took hundreds of pages of top-secret sensitive intelligence documents outside the FBI to unknown recipients. Melik Can Dickerson, with the assistance of her direct supervisor, forged signatures on top-secret documents related to certain 9/11 detainees. All of these incidents were confirmed and reported to FBI management. This case was confirmed by the Senate Judiciary Committee. Melik Can Dickerson and several FBI targets of investigation then hastily left the United States in 2002, and the case still remains uninvestigated criminally. Not only does the supervisor facilitating these criminal conducts remain in a supervisory position, he has been promoted to supervising Arabic language units of the FBI counterterrorism and counterintelligence investigations. Your report has omitted these significant incidents, has foregone any accountability whatsoever, and your recommendations have refrained from addressing the serious information security breach and highly likely espionage issue. Over 3 years ago, more than 4 months prior to the September 11th terrorist attack, in April of 2001, a long-term FBI informant asset who had been providing the Bureau with information since 1990 provided 2 FBI agents and a translator with specific information regarding a terrorist attack being planned by Osama bin Laden. This asset informant was previously a high-level intelligence officer in Iran, in charge of intelligence from Afghanistan. Through his contacts in Afghanistan, he received information that, 1, Osama bin Laden was planning a major terrorist attack in the United States targeting 4 to 5 major cities. 2, the attack was going to involve airplanes. 3, some of the individuals in charge of carrying out this attack were already in place in the United States. 4, the attack was going to be carried out soon, in a few months. The agents who received this information reported it to their supervisor, Special Agent in charge of counterterrorism, Thomas Fields, at the FBI Washington Field Office. No action was taken by the Special Agent in charge, and after 9/11, the agents and the translators were told to keep quiet regarding this issue. The translator who was present during the session with the FBI informant, Mr. Beirut Sarshar, reported this incident to Director Mueller in writing and later to the Department of Justice Inspector General. After almost 3 years since September 11th, many officials still refuse to admit having specific information regarding the terrorist plans to attack the United States. The Phoenix memo received months prior to the 9/11 attack specifically warned FBI headquarters of pilot training and their possible link to terror activities against the United States. 4 months prior to the terrorist attack, the Iranian asset provided the FBI with specific information regarding the use of airplanes, major U.S. cities, and Osama bin Laden issuing the order. Colleen Rowley likewise reported that same specific information had been provided to FBI headquarters. Only 1 month after the catastrophic events of September 11th, while many agents were working around the clock to obtain leads and to investigate those responsible for the attack, those with possible connections to the attack, and those who might be planning possible future attacks, the bureaucratic administrators in the FBI's largest and most important translation unit were covering up their past failures, blocking important leads and information, and jeopardizing ongoing terrorist investigations. The supervisor involved with this incident, Mike Fegali, was in charge of certain important Middle Eastern languages within the FBI Washington Field Office, and he had a record of previous misconducts. After the supervisor, several severe misconducts were reported to the FBI's higher-level management. After his conducts were reported to the Inspector General's office, to the United States Congress, and to the 9/11 Commission, he was promoted to include the FBI's Arabic language unit under his supervision. Today, this supervisor, Mike Fegali, remains in the FBI Washington Field Office and is in charge of a language unit receiving those chit-chats that our color-coded threat system is based upon. Yet, your report contains zero information regarding these systemic problems that led us to our failure in preventing the 9/11 terrorist attack. In your report, there are no references to individuals responsible for hindering past and current investigations or those who are willing to compromise our security and our lives for their career advancement and security. During its many hearings, your commission chose not to ask the questions necessary to unveil the true symptoms of our failed intelligence system. Your commission intentionally bypassed these severe symptoms and chose not to include them in its 567-page report. Now, without a complete list of our failures pre-9/11, without a comprehensive examination of true symptoms that exist in our intelligence system, without assigning any accountability whatsoever, and therefore without a sound and reliable diagnosis, your commission is attempting to divert attention from the real problems and to prescribe a cure through hasty and costly measures. It is like attempting to put a gold-lined, expensive porcelain cap over a deeply decayed tooth with a rotten root, without first treating the root and without first cleaning the infected tooth. Sincerely, Sibel Edmonds.
I love that analogy. I love picking up some of these analogies. They're great for talk. That's a good note.
I I have spoken with Sibel because what I uncovered in Ptech connects with some of the things that she has discovered. Sibel is not allowed to disclose content, but she can ask me questions. I know some of the things that she mentioned there connect directly to what I discovered, and so it was my pleasure to read Sibel's letter. If there are any questions, if not, I'll go into my presentation.
Go into your presentation.
I'm sorry.
You can have this one.
I apologize.
Oh, that's all right.
As I said before, I'm a New Yorker. I'm from Ground Zero. I live and work down there for 10 years. And around 9/11, I was doing work on Wall Street for a large bank and in D.C. for a DARPA, which is a Defense Advanced Research project agency, for a project of theirs. Therefore, I had connections deep within the government and at high levels in the banking community. I call this the FBI and Ptech, a case to answer. I believe Mike Rupert has mentioned a couple of things regarding technology capabilities that he believes and has had confirmed were going on during 9/11. I believe if you listen to this presentation carefully, you will begin to connect a lot more dots. For me, 9/11 will always be about the 3,000 that we lost there and the shocking truths that we have begun to discover in the troubled years since. Pictured here, since it is my backyard, is one of the final pictures of the South Tower right before it came down, taken by a neighbor of mine, Ted, who said he could be here today, but he isn't. Ground Zero was my backyard. It hit the residents down there very differently than I think it hit people in other cities. My journey of the FBI and Ptech is one that started after 9/11, way after 9/11, but it took me to the White House, 2 senators' offices, the Secret Service, the FBI, 3 connections to organized crime. But first, I want to take you to where it did begin for me. On the morning of September the 11th, I was supposed to be on the 106th floor of the World Trade Center at a risk conference that a company by the name of Risk Waters was putting on. I was late that morning. In many ways, I think that my life was spared, and I get to do this today on their behalf. It is my privilege to think that. Prior to 9/11, I was a civilian EMT, and when the planes hit, I called my job and I said I had just turned into an EMT. I changed my clothes and I headed down to the site. As night fell on September 11th, 2001, I was on triage duty on the edge of the pile. That's a picture of me. I think I had been injured at that point, but I was not a happy camper. None of us were, because a lot of us were wondering where all the help was. Those of us who were right on the pile were in dire straits. In any case, rescue workers were transporting body parts as fast as they could, wherever they could, mainly to the triage sites, and they were placing what they found anywhere, including on the floor next to me. It was clear to me, and I'm sorry I have to make this graphic, but the truth, 9/11 has been so sanitized, I think it needs to be understood that most had died horrific deaths. And we were seeing evidence of what some had been through on the flights. I made a promise to something I saw there that if anything fell into my lap, I would not look the other way. I would do whatever I could to prevent such a horror from happening again. After a week, I returned fairly injured to what was left of my contaminated neighborhood and my life. I had a good life. I did risk at JP Morgan Chase. Just to take a break from all the heavy stuff, what I do was to devise a way to monitor everything going on in a very large company to stop big problems from happening. There's that little cloud there and my very bizarre picture of how I think about this problem. I am a person who was merging two disciplines, risk management and something called enterprise architecture, which is fairly esoteric, but at the end of the day, we seek to prevent large problems from happening anywhere in a large global enterprise. At JP Morgan, I was working on the next generation risk blueprint, which is all about how to prevent these things from happening. Bad business practice, such as money laundering, road trading, and massive computer failures, anything you could imagine would go wrong. I had a lot of leeway consulting as a senior risk architect to think out of the box and actually get my ideas implemented. I was funded out of a strategic fund. I reported to the directors, and I was pretty happy. JP Morgan thought very highly of me, and they were thinking of funding, in conjunction with my project in DC, the next generation risk software. What I needed to do what I did was a really smart piece of software. Really, really smart. Its job would be to think about all the information. And this is where you may connect a dot. The job of this software would be to think about all the information that represented what was going on in the enterprise at any given time as bank business was being transacted worldwide. For example, it would be a surveillance software that would look for trading patterns that indicated someone was up to no good, and then do something about it. Send a message somewhere, send the transaction information somewhere, perhaps shut their system down, perhaps shut another system down, perhaps start something else up elsewhere. This kind of capability is very, very essential in today's world. However, this kind of software is not found in Microsoft or not even in IBM. A small group of very esoteric software companies make this kind of enterprise software, and it is very pricey. So you can't afford to pick wrong. And I asked all my colleagues who are industry gurus what would they recommend for this. My buddies recommended Ptech. And my buddies in JP Morgan were also evaluating Ptech. And why not Ptech? What you see on the screen is a very prestigious list of Ptech's client. Ptech is a very small software company located in Quincy, Massachusetts. They put out this kind of software product that I was talking about, and it has an artificial intelligence core. Ptech assured me that they had something called clearances, so I figured there'd be no problem getting them cleared to come into JP Morgan Chase to evaluate our very confidential risk plans for the future, how we would stop money laundering in the future, for instance. IBM told me that they were planning on making Ptech a special global partner. With IBM standing next to the small vendor Ptech, I was pretty excited that I was on the right track. There was no problem getting Ptech cleared through security to come visit and talk serious business. They were with me for 20 minutes before I suspected something was not right. So I called my colleagues. They told me to talk to ex-Ptech and Ptech employees right away, but they told me something even more ominous. They said, do not let them out of your sight and don't let them take anything from the bank. So, with Ptech people standing still feet away from me, they told me a hair-raising story of Ptech's myriad connections to terrorism. First, to the person you see in this picture who was placed on the U.S. terror list in October 2001. His name is Yassin Qadi, a Saudi businessman. It's the one the arrow is pointing towards. I thought these people were kidding, or they were setting up a play for Ptech's business with JP Morgan. I insisted on proof and documentation. I went to 2 states to collect it, including this and other pictures. I also spoke with the Boston FBI, where they said they had reported this 9 months earlier, just weeks after the attack. This was the end of May 2002. At the very same time, I am discovering this about Ptech because their meeting with me and JP Morgan Chase was at the ending of May. At the very same time, on May 30th, 2002, Agent Robert Wright of the Chicago FBI at a congressional hearing appeared on the steps of the Capitol and burst into tears apologizing to the 9/11 families, stating his investigation into terrorism financing had been repeatedly shut down, and he had been censured for pushing it. Actually, his investigation was exactly into Yasin Qadi, whom he called bin Laden's banker. Wright's investigation was shut down in the late 90s. He stated if he had been able to continue and shut down the funding to al-Qaeda, 9/11 may not have happened. His original quote was, "It would not have happened." When you show up to work within line of sight of Ground Zero and shake hands with some group the FBI agents said had financed it, what exactly is the playbook? And there was more, like the Ginsu knife commercial. For me, something big had fallen into my lap. I had to make some decisions. Agent Wright said his investigation into the founders and financiers of Ptech and their financing shell, something called BMI, was also shut down. BMI stands for, I'm sorry, go back here. Oh, sorry. Okay. And now you see, you think I'm a technology expert. Well, BMI, which is in the first column, stands for Baitul Mal, which later turned out to be a front for Hamas and al-Qaeda. Little interesting point here, Governor Kane did a $24 million land deal with a sub of BMI, 3% of which of the commission went back to BMI, and around the same time, some of his New Jersey citizens were being blown up in Israel by Hamas. I do not say that allegedly because this has been reported in a Department of Treasury report, which happened to fall into my hands. The people who started BMI were exactly the same who started Ptech, and in fact, the chief scientist was the one I shook hands with when they came down to JP Morgan Chase. In fact, he was the one who made me suspicious based on some behavior that he was exhibiting at JP Morgan. In addition, there were references to a recent raid in Herndon, Virginia, a key target of which was Yaqub Mirza and his many organizations that were accused of being terror charity fronts to al-Qaeda. Yaqub Mirza was on the board of Ptech. I demanded proof of that and got it. So far, we're up to 3 names, but wait, there's more. I went down to meet a group of the Ptech and ex-Ptech employees in Virginia. I wanted to see them face to face and have them tell me this horrific story to my face and have them write down in their own hand what they were telling me and to provide documentation. And they did. I asked the Boston FBI to send me something that was proof this company had the terrorism connections they claimed it did, and the person there did. The Ptech employees kept going on. They kept drawing diagrams for 3 or 4 days until I was convinced this was something out of a Tom Clancy novel. If what indeed they were saying was true, this company needed to be stopped now before they did damage elsewhere. By the time they were finished drawing their diagrams, there were 17 names linked to terror. The glaring question was, why wasn't Ptech shut down? Was there an ongoing investigation? Did the FBI just not get it? Or was someone being protected? What do you do when the Boston FBI tells you, Indira, you are in a better position than I am to get real documentation on the situation with Ptech, so please keep doing what you're doing? Who do you call? I brought everything back, sat down, and thought about what it could mean, and I drew this diagram. I did know that Ptech had been in the FAA, and that was the most serious accusation of all. I called my friends in intelligence and law enforcement. I spoke to the New York Joint Terrorism Task Force and the New York Police Department Counterterrorism Unit from J.P. Morgan Chase's buildings. I laid out what I had to them, and I asked them if I was going insane or was there any truth to this. I asked them what I should do. The Ptech people said they were being followed, and they thought I was. One of them in particular told me that I was in danger, that they were in danger, and they were leaving the country with their kids. I asked the JTTF if they could arrange protection for us. They said yes, but later backed off. I went to the CIO, the Chief Information Officer of J.P. Morgan Chase, who turned my story over to the top 3 people who run the bank. Then he said the general auditor and his staff wanted to have a word with me. As a consolation prize, as I left his office, he told me the FBI at the highest level had validated the entire story as I laid it out. So what happened next is I went to the principal's office. The general auditor and his group of security people, the ones with the uniforms, grilled me as though I was a terrorist and did their intimidation routine. It was not as severe as Sibel went through, but it was pretty bad to the point where I left and contacted an investigative reporting team in Boston that the Boston FBI had used when they were looking for some terrorists right after 9/11. Just in case I should go missing, I wanted to have someone in the media to have a note of that. The name of the person there is Joe Bergantino, and he knows that I am speaking to you about this today. He is from the mainstream media, and I'm here to tell you that he went through hell and almost lost his career pushing this. There are some very good people in mainstream media. In any case, back to the general auditor who threatened me in no uncertain terms. I looked out the window to ground zero and back at him, and I asked him if this was about the Saudi money flowing through the bank. He turned his eyes away and said, "We've made a lot of mistakes." However, he told me that if I mentioned Ptech again, there would be no place for me in the bank. I had gone from being a person who could do no wrong, who was politically protected there, to someone who was about to get thrown out. My colleagues in the business commiserated but said, "Indira, everybody knew what Ptech was about." Well, I didn't, and sure as heck the 3,000 didn't. Ptech was eventually raided on December 6, 2002. And here's the story of how that happened. When I was thrown out of J.P. Morgan Chase at the ending of June, no one would have anything to do with me, but I was sure if we kept the investigation going, the good boys in the FBI would finally raid Ptech and all would be well, because what had happened is that the I-team had commissioned an investigation in Washington, D.C. to verify the story I laid out to them. Not only had it been verified, they called me in July and said everything I had put on the table was correct and it was worse than I had laid out. They were going to air the Ptech story nationwide as the lead story on the first-year anniversary of 9/11, with me in the story. There were many other networks that had gotten wind of it, and all the networks were going to run the Ptech story on the first-year anniversary. However, the White House got wind of the investigation, I have proof of that, and shut the story down in late August. Around the anniversary, the first-year anniversary, persons of interest were seen leaving Ptech and the country. No raids. By November, I wrote a report and threatened to send it to 10 defense agencies per week until something was done. Finally, Ptech was raided on a Friday in December. But when Ari Fleischer said there was nothing wrong with Ptech, I became persona non grata, blacklisted everywhere. We went to Senator Grassley's office, who created an FBI Ptech file. I was debriefed at a National Threat Assessment Center, the Secret Service, who, oh, by the way, was a client of Ptech, and they asked me whether Ptech was the same as Promise. I knew better than to answer that, and I told them, "You have a copy of the software, you tell me." References to clandestines also in operation at Ptech have been made by a credible intelligence agency. Anytime we attempt to write the truth behind this, the people who are writing the truth are getting sued. The Kane Commission does not mention Ptech at all. I did a number of things in my research, and when I ran into the drugs, I was told that if I mentioned the money to the drugs around 9/11, that would be the end of me. That is the current threat that I'm under, and therefore I will speak out about the drugs at another forum. I did not expect the Keene Commission to go anywhere near the FBI and Ptech, but I hope all Americans will demand answers regarding the FBI and Ptech. I would like to leave you with this one question. Not only why is Ptech still operating, but why did Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Chertoff state that they cannot differentiate between terrorism, organized crime, and drug dealing? And is that the reason the Keene Commission will not make terrorism financing a priority in the future? Thank you.
It's okay, wait for a minute.